All right, let's talk Sapphiron. If you've ever set foot in Naxxramas, you know the deal. You got to stack frost resistance. But how does it actually work? It's honestly one of the most misunderstood mechanics in all of classic WoW. So today, we're going to break it all down. And we're going to start with the one question that seems to trip everybody up.
So here's the scenario, right? You've done your homework, you farmed some gear, and you're sitting at, say, 105 frost resistance. But then you look over at a tank who's maxed out at 315, and you see this huge 75% resist pop up. And you think to yourself, wait a minute, can I do that too?
And the answer, which might actually surprise you, is yeah, you absolutely can. Even with just 105 frost resistance, it is totally possible for you to get a full 75% damage reduction on a single hit. But, and this is a huge but, if you think that means you can just slap on a little FR and pray to the RNG gods, well, that's where things get complicated. Because here's the catch. While you can hit that jackpot 75% resist, it's pretty rare. The key word here is average. Over the course of the whole fight, with all those damage ticks constantly hitting you, your 105 frost resistance is really only going to give you about 25% damage reduction on average. So what's going on here? How does that math work?
Okay, it all boils down to this really interesting system called partial resistance. And the absolute best way to wrap your head around it is to imagine you're rolling a special weighted die every single time you take a tick of frost damage.
So check this out. Every single time Sapphiron's frost damage hits you, the game doesn't just subtract a flat percentage. Nope. Instead, it's like it rolls a die to see what percentage you'll resist for that one hit. It could be 0%, 10, 20, 30, all the way up to that magical 75%. The important thing to get is that stacking more frost resistance doesn't add new numbers to the die. It just loads the dice in your favor, making those bigger numbers more likely to come up. And this is what that weighted dice really looks like in practice. On the left, with 105 frost resistance, your dice is, let's just say it's not on your side. It's heavily weighted to land on those low numbers, like 0, 10, maybe 20%. You can get that high roll, but it's a long shot. Now look at the right. At 315 FR, the cap, the dice is loaded to almost always land on 50 or 75%. See the difference? That's how you go from a 25% average to a whopping 75% average. It's not about luck. It's about consistency.
Okay, so now that we get the how, let's talk about the what. Let's apply this to the fight itself. Which of Sapphiron's abilities are we actually rolling this die against? You're really looking at three main frost abilities. You've got the Frost Aura, that's the constant, unavoidable damage tickling the whole raid. Then there's the Blizzard, another big source of raid-wide pain, and finally you have the Frostbolt Volley, which is a bit more targeted and comes with a nasty little surprise. Now, for the Frost Aura and the Blizzard, that idea of consistency is everything. Because these are damage over time abilities, every single tick of damage is a completely new dice roll. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of rolls throughout the fight. And that's exactly why your average matters so much. It's what saves your healer's mana in the long run. Okay, that Frostbolt Volley, it's a special case. You have to think of it as two different things happening at once. The damage part, that's exactly what we've been talking about. It's a partial resist, you roll your weighted dice. But then there's the freeze effect, the thing that roots you to the spot. That works differently. It's what we call a binary resist. It's all or nothing. You either resist the freeze completely, or you get frozen. There's no partial freeze. Your frost resistance just gives you a flat percentage chance to ignore it altogether.
All right, and this brings us to probably the single biggest myth in the entire Sapphiron fight. So we just said that frost resistance can help you resist the freeze from the Frostbolt Volley. The logical next step is to assume it helps with that other freeze mechanic too, right?
I mean, it just makes sense, doesn't it? If I stack a ton of frost resistance, surely I have a chance to avoid being turned into one of those giant ice blocks, the ones the raid has to hide behind. That's how it should work, right?
Nope. Absolutely 100% false. And this is so important to understand. The ice block mechanic is not a spell that you can resist. It's a scripted event that's hard-coded into the fight. And if you think about it, there's a really good reason for this, and it goes right back to the original fight design. Imagine if you could resist it. You could have a situation where nobody gets turned into an ice block, and then, well, the entire raid wipes to the frost breath because there's nowhere to hide. The game needs that mechanic to happen. So it doesn't roll for a resist, it just picks a player and poof, you're an ice block. Your gear doesn't get a vote.
So,
Now that we've busted the myths and we understand the real mechanics, what does this actually mean for you when you're picking out your gear? Let's turn all this theory into some simple, practical advice.
Look, for most tanks and DPS, the magic number is right around 105 frost resistance, and that's after your buffs. Going much higher than that usually means sacrificing too much damage or threat, and it's just not worth it, unless your healers are seriously struggling. And for you healers, the general advice is actually 0. Yep, 0. The raw healing power and mana you get from your normal gear is almost always going to help the raid more than the small amount of personal damage you'd mitigate with FR gear.
And seriously, don't sleep on what that 105 FR gets you. A 25% average damage reduction across the fight is huge. It's not about preventing one big hit. It's about smoothing out all that constant raid damage, making things predictable, and giving your healers the breathing room they desperately need to deal with everything else.
So let's just boil it all down. Frost resistance isn't about praying for lucky 75% resists, and it has absolutely nothing to do with avoiding the ice block. It's about one thing: consistent, average damage reduction that makes the entire fight stable and manageable for your healers. So now that you know how it really works, take a look at your own gear. Is it actually helping your raid, or is it holding you back?